a lot of companies and also big companies like Google just jumping on that and shoehorning AI into their products without thinking what problem is it solving. It's not the research in me saying, wait, before we do something with AI, we need to go study users, because we have studied users for years, right? All product teams at Google know what the main problems are of those products. And you can take those and say, okay, with these 100 problems that we know, which of those can be solved with this new technology called AI?
As many products introduced AI too soon. Try our AI again. We have a new AI feature.
That is the problem of this stupid mantra of perfect is the enemy of good. I wish we would be talking about perfect. We're talking about good.
Javier, thanks for joining us to our podcast. I was dreaming for a long time to have this discussion because I think that user research is not in focus of many designers as much as it has to be.
Well, thanks for having me here, Yuri. I'm always excited to talk about research and about the industry, so thanks for inviting me here.
Who don't know Javier? Javier is one of the leaders in the industry. He spent almost all of his professional life managing UX research teams, working, as I understand, in YouTube and Google Play, and that makes you an expert. And now, as I know, you started your own school for researchers. Maybe you can also tell us a bit about that.
Yes, my name is Javier. I built research teams across Google for the past 14 years. YouTube, ads, cloud, play, different sizes, different facets, quant, qual, different aspects of research. But most of my career, I've been always delving into research and how we can understand users and generate insights that help us to move forward. Product strategy.
Why did you decide to focus on research?
So I started to study psychology because I wanted to become a clinical psychologist and help people that have mental disorders, and realized early on in my studies that this wasn't for me, that it was too tough. And I was always very interested in technology, always that kind of kid that would build computers and figure out the latest tech and stuff. But I always knew I didn't want to code. And so when while studying, I discovered this area of human-computer interaction, which later on was rebranded UX, and I started focusing on that, and I realized there's this overlap between psychology, so humans, and technology. So that's why I moved into research. That was the natural next step.
I know some researchers who are psychologists who are very into psychology, and there are people who are very empathetic to the users, and there are people who are very scientific to the research. And when you go to the interview with them, you'll feel that they are almost like robots. They have the list of questions. When you build the team, do you focus more on people who are more scientists or more who feel people?
I don't think that if you are an empathetic or not that empathetic moderator really depends on if you're a psychologist or something else. It's not like when you study psychology, you necessarily learn how to drive empathetic conversations. It's more a personality thing. And personally, I think the best teams are always when you mix different facets, different backgrounds, when you have diverse teams that nurture each other and where you have different strengths. And so for research itself too, there is absolutely a place for maybe a very empathetic ethnographer that believes in deep research with one person, understanding them really deep, and then maybe having someone that is more on the quantitative side of research that wants to run A/B tests or surveys and so on. And if somebody reads completely like a robot in an interview, then they're likely not that good of a researcher in the first place. So you can create a nice atmosphere where a user feels like in a good situation to open up without compromising your neutrality and basically becoming biased or something like that. That is what good researchers do.
I remember that at least some time ago, there were a lot of advocates that would say, if you do online interview, you shouldn't even turn on the camera, because if you start building the report, in this case, people will try to be liked and they will not tell, they will behave differently. So it's only audio and as less human as possible. Do you think it changed, or is there still some schools, some people who advocate the less connection, less emotions, the better?
There will always be people that argue that way. If you think about psychology and how psychotherapy came to be, with the beginning, Sigmund Freud, he put people on a bed and had them talk to the wall for an hour. He wouldn't say anything, wouldn't look at them, would just take notes. And there's still people who believe that's the right way to do it. I don't think that there is value in that. There's different purposes for research, right? And if we're talking about UX research, the main purpose for UX research is to generate insights that help the team move the product forward. And as such, it is important that you speak with users, potential users, past users, and you create a connection. Absolutely, you should have the camera turned on. You should create a connection with that user. You should make them feel comfortable so they are able to open up and to also say like good and bad stuff, right? They can feel as natural as possible, even if it is an artificial situation. So I don't know who said you should turn off the camera, but I think that's dumb.
I remember you had recently a post regarding bad, like poor communication from some companies when they say they will fire low performers. And like, how do you approach this kind of situation when you understand that maybe there is a person and he stays as a junior for 5 years and he's not moving forward? Is there any hope for these people?
Like if somebody doesn't progress, like they get stuck, right? It is not always because they don't have the potential. Maybe they are in a situation that leads them to be in that position and they don't figure a way out, and you try different things, but they get stuck, right? And if they leave to another team or maybe another company, they're in a new situation, maybe that new environment gives them what they need to progress. So that's why I refuse to call somebody is a low performer. Somebody might be performing low, like might not be performing well enough in that situation. And I do think that the team and the manager bears also part of the responsibility for that, because as a manager, your job is to create an environment where somebody can prosper. I have worked with people that struggle with performance. We have tried a lot of different things to help them get on the right path. But sometimes it just doesn't work out. And you have to admit to yourself as a manager and them to themselves that this is not working out. And so changing the situation to a new one, maybe within the same company or even outside the company, can be a healthy thing. And I've had situations where people came back afterwards to me and said, like, this was the best thing that I left, that I did this new thing. Now I'm doing much better. But sometimes someone doesn't have in them, right? They are at the flying altitude. They cannot progress. And I've always questioned that attitude of endless growth, right? Like, it's like, everybody needs to grow always, right? And so if you're junior, you have to become senior. Why is that, right? Like, why do we hire a junior in a company? We hire a junior in a company because there is junior work to be done, right? If all the work we have is for seniors, why would we hire a junior? So we're hiring a junior because we think that there are specific tasks, there's specific work that can be done by a junior. If somebody stays junior forever, they can't progress. Is that necessarily a bad thing if we have junior work to be done, right? Can we not say, well, if that's how you feel comfortable and you're doing a good work as a junior, right? You're performing, you're delivering, right? You're cheap because you're junior, so we don't have to pay you a lot, but like you're happy, right? And this is like, why can this person not stay junior forever, right? Why does everybody have to grow until they're at the level where they're maybe like the Peter principle? You have promoted yourself to a place where you're incompetent. At Google, it was like that. There was this expectation of people having to grow, right? So it could become a problem if you're in the same level for too long. But I don't know. From a human perspective, I think that's wrong. And I also think it's not possible to grow forever.
Yeah, I totally agree. Maybe the problem is with the name of the position, because junior means that you are somebody young, and if you get older, you have to become a senior.
Yes, maybe, but and maybe the assumption that junior means, I have had that. I've had women that moved at a later stage of their career into research because they studied something, they had babies, they had a break, and then they came back and they studied something else, and then they moved into research when they were like way above 40, and they were a junior researcher because that's what they were. Like they had not worked as a UX researcher before, and that was fine. So I don't think that assumption that junior is young is correct, but I agree there is this perception in the industry that this is what it means.
There is a new era of software development somehow connected with AI, and they say that this is new type of technology because it's based on technology push more than the user pull. Innovation type, because like ideally you will do user research, you will learn what people need, that you will find technology that will help people to fix their pains and get what they need. In AI era, everybody rushes to build something because technology is there and then has to find out if people actually need it. And one of the examples you mentioned in your posts is about the human AI pin that failed a bit, hopefully not forever. How do AI companies should think about understanding what do they have to build?
Let's detach that conversation for a minute from AI, right? When you work in product development, the most successful products are always products that solve problems. It will be hard for you to come up with a good example of a product that solves no user problem but is super successful. And the history is paved with failed products that have been built without really solving a problem. Part of hype, which is something like Gartner termed, like the hype curve. Part of hype when a new technology comes in is that everybody jump on that technology. It is a hype, and they start develop a lot of stuff with that technology, inspired by the possibilities of the technology. And what happens in these hype curves is that companies stop looking at problems and start focusing on technology. So instead of being a user-centric product development, it becomes a technology-centric product development. And whenever that happens, you can show examples of why that didn't work and how products fail. So there's a lot of companies and also big companies like Google just jumping on that and shoehorning AI into their products without thinking what problem is it solving, right? And if we're talking about what problem is it solving, I don't think that you have to go and do research. It's not the research in me saying, wait, before we do something with AI, we need to go study users, because we have studied users for years. All product teams at Google know what the main problems are of those products. So you have a long list of problems that are unsolved, and you can take those and say, okay, with these 100 problems that we know, which of those can be solved with this new technology called AI? And I give you an example for where this was done really well is for YouTube. For YouTube, we did know for years, since YouTube exists, that one problem that we have is that the access to videos from people that don't speak the language. The world is big, YouTube is global, and we've built band-aid solutions such as captions. Okay, you can upload captions, but who has the money or the time to actually afford creating those captions? So that is not. Then there's auto captions, which have been traditionally really poor, but that was kind of like at least something, so you can watch a video and understand. Now AI comes along, and with that the possibility to automatically have a voice track in another language, which is pretty good. And so that's what YouTube did. They created this new feature that larger YouTubers already have access to, where your video, if it's in English, it will be automatically in 20 different tracks. So you can add some experimental languages, so it's not fully fleshed out. But now somebody in Japan can watch my videos in Japanese. That's an amazing application of AI. Bad example for that, where it's also a problem, was this AI pen, where you would say, okay, we developed this new device that is like this assistant in a device that you take with you, that you ask for stuff, such as book me a flight. I mean, that was one of the examples. Book me a flight to New York, which we knew already that this was not a real problem. Like, nobody wants to book their flights through a voice interface. At Google, we did the same mistake for Google Assistant. We developed the entire process of somebody through Google Assistant booking a flight or a hotel. Total failure. Nobody used it because it turns out nobody really wants to book their flight that way. And that we knew before. And so starting with a problem is key, especially for AI, because it's really expensive, not that much to build it, but to run it. To run those models, you need data centers, you need processors, it's just costly. So if you build a feature that nobody's asking for and nobody will use it, and so you wasted a lot of resources.
And this is also interesting because on a podcast yesterday, I heard some developers sharing their experience about Google Gemini, and they said that that was one of the biggest mistakes of Google, because they were so in a hurry to launch their own AI that they had to, and everybody was saying, okay, you have to try it, and everybody tried this product, and then the quality wasn't as good as some top state-of-the-art models, and now everybody thinks that Gemini maybe is not so strong, and it's much harder now to ask people to try this again. And we had similar situation with many products that introduced AI too soon. People tried to use it, didn't see the value, and then, for example, in ClickUp, when I log into ClickUp, every time it pushes me to try our AI again. We have a new AI feature. Maybe now you will see the new value there. Because I tried it a long time ago, I didn't see the value, and then I stopped using that. And now it's much, much harder for them to convince me to try it again.
I agree. And that is the problem of this stupid mantra of perfect is the enemy of good. So that's like what they always say when you're like, this is not ready to launch. You go like, perfect is the enemy of good. Like, I wish we would be talking about perfect. We're talking about good, right? So it's actually not good enough is the enemy of good, right? And quality matters, especially to users, right? When they try it out, it's a very delicate moment. Yesterday, today, I tried out a tool to automatically translate a Google Slides. I have Google Slides, 60 slides. It's in German. I need it in English. Automatically translate. It's actually not that difficult. But AI made up stuff and added sentences that were not there. I mean, this is so bad. I will never try that again. You should be careful before you launch crap to users. And it's not that Google doesn't know that. Like, Google has made that experience many times, but it is part of the Google DNA to break things to learn. That was since the beginning. It's like launch fast and break things and then improve along the way. And that worked when Google was smaller. But when you have billions of users and you launch broken crap, then the consequences are different. But Google can't get rid of that DNA.
And then you have a graveyard of the products.
Oh yeah, many.
Yeah, but in a way, I like this approach because it helps others also to learn from the case studies and then try to build something. How do you see the current shift in the research industry? Because we had very high spike of demand of UX researchers during the pandemics. There were like thousands of jobs openings. Almost every company were hiring lots of researchers. We ourselves had a lot of requests even from other agencies to help them to source researchers to provide them with this help. And nowadays see the demand is like 10% of what it was during the pandemics, but it's stable and maybe growing, but not so fast. So what do you think will happen in the next near future?
First of all, I have to say that this is not a UX research specific thing. We have, in the pandemic, hired all disciplines like crazy, PM, Eng, design, all facets of UX, and all that demand has gone down. I have not seen data yet that would show convincingly that research was impacted harder than other disciplines. And I'm working with a lot of people, helping them to find jobs. And it's not like, despite me being a researcher, I work with many designers. So it's important to not create that perception that research has been somehow hit differently. Product development in general has experienced layoffs, and you have people of all disciplines struggling to find jobs. So hopefully companies will stop laying off people one day, because right now they seem to like it a lot, and they passionately lay off people over and over again, which means the market is flooded with talent. And as long as this happens, the situation will stay very difficult. But as companies hopefully will stop doing that in the future, things will normalize. And as product teams will grow, that means design and research and all the disciplines will have their place there. So I don't see a future where you can develop reasonably like good products without generating user insights. Now, the question if there will be a hybrid model of design and researcher, that's kind of an old thing. It's actually not a new question. It's an old one, like UX generalists, they were called. And if you look at the maturity development of UX teams, that is typically where it begins. So low maturity companies will have generalists. So maybe they have no UX discipline and then suddenly go like, what is that? We need something like nobody thinks about the users. What should we do? Oh, we need to hire a UX. So they hire, and the job post, you can read them. It's like a UX specialist, or sometimes it's called UX designer, but it lists research. And as the UX teams grow and mature in that company, like maybe the next couple are also generalists, but then eventually the UX discipline itself will say like, well, this makes no sense, right? Like we need good designers and we need good researchers. We shouldn't have people that do both, and we should not have people test their own stuff. So we need to split, and then they might add research later on. They might add writing and other disciplines too. So as they grow in maturity, they move away from people that do design and research. And so typically when you look at job posts of generalists, these are either startups that don't have enough money to afford multiple UXers, or it's companies that have no UX tradition and they're starting to move into that direction. And so that's what they're looking for. But I don't think that the future is people doing both. And in fact, like when I work with people that struggle to find jobs, it's very often people that have a profile where their resume says I'm a UX designer and researcher. And the first thing I do is like, you need to focus, right? Are you a designer or a researcher? We throw that stuff away. We rewrite the resume and suddenly they get interviews, because now the recruiter sees, oh, that's a designer. And they don't think, oh, like that person doesn't know what they are.
And this is a bit controversial, and thank you for bringing that up, because one of the most prominent things I see in the internet and among colleagues, that there is a huge risk that in some companies, maybe that's because the research expertise is not built in correct way. So there are researchers that can do, for example, like 3 studies in a quarter or something like that. So, and there are a lot of designers researchers that need their help. So then they request help with research. Researcher comes, he conducts a study and goes away. So he is not in the context of the specific feature or a product. He is not very connected with the business roadmap, with the planning, with everything. And very often his research is just validation of the hypothesis. And he comes and say, yeah, you should do it. I validated it works. So there is a bias because the task was written like just test if our assumption is correct. So what we did in our place, we tried never to use researcher as sole person who is doing research and like work as a team together. But is it the right solution or there are even better solutions? What would you say?
The problem here of what you describe is actually not the research problem, but it's a service model problem, because some companies even have that for all of UX. Like UX is a central entity, and if you need like UI support, you will go and ask for a designer, and then maybe you go and ask for a researcher, and exactly what you described happens. And so if a company has a situation, it's because they build up a crappy org, right? They don't understand UX and they don't understand product development, frankly. They don't understand that product development is teamwork and that you need the people that work on this specific products or features to work together, and that includes also research. So the researchers need to be part of the team. Yes, you typically have less researchers than designers. So you have between design and research, maybe you have like 2 to 3 designers per researcher, which means a researcher will work on more than just one product, right? When I started at YouTube, like 2011, I was in charge for YouTube in the creator space for the upload flow of YouTube, for analytics, which is like traffic to videos, and for annotations, which is no longer around, which is kind of like you could write stuff in your videos and things. And these were 3 teams, and I supported all 3 of them, right? But I was part of those teams. I would maybe not sit with them all the time, right? There would be phases where I wouldn't sit with them because they were deep down, I didn't need to do research, but I knew about the 3 products. I knew about all the stakeholders. I was involved in that. And that is how it needs to work for design and research and writing and other disciplines. They need to be part of that team. It cannot be a service org. And so if companies had that problem, that's just because they build up the wrong org, and that serves them rights. If they build up the wrong org, they will have bad results.
There are some objections, so not to do enough research and let's just make developers decide what they want to build. Because yesterday, there was a new podcast from very influential developer, CEO, who used to work as engineer at Twitch. And he said that almost rude sentences regarding UX research.
Doesn't Twitch have user research though? The problem with user research is the people that you want to get info from, which are the top creators, they don't respond to user research requests. And if you're doing user research, the people who get that email from Twitch and they're like, yeah, I'll dedicate an hour to telling Twitch what's wrong, they go in and complain about how hard it is to be a small creator. And if you listen to those people, you're going to ruin the fucking platform. I know that because they ruined the fucking platform. So no, there is no user research that works at a company that has that level of tiering between its users. You can't interview the users that matter. You have to understand the users that matter. You have to be friends with them. You have to be the person they call when something goes wrong. There's no world in which Twitch's user research could ever have solved these problems. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, yeah, I don't know that engineer, but I think he's full of shit. So you should teach PMs to have maybe not beers, but coffee with their users. That is a discussion I have regularly with researchers when go like, no, my PM wants to talk with users. I'm like, yeah, let them. Like that is important. You need PMs to have empathy for the users. You need to understand, they need to understand the problems. They need to have those relationships. Absolutely. The advantage of having a researcher that is in charge to generate user insight only like specifically is that this person has the skills, the knowledge, the tools, and the time to ensure that you're not building your product based on a few voices that you had coffee with, right? That you don't over-index on that, but you try to get like a broad perspective of different type of users. And if that person had the problem that in Twitch or wherever it was, the researchers only spoke with small creators, then that's obviously a problem of how that was set up there. Because for instance, when I worked in YouTube, like we did research with small YouTube creators, but with the largest. I've had the biggest creators, like we went to places where they were, or we like gave them enough incentive to speak with us. Very often they are the first ones to actually use those features that are built for creators, right? They get access to those features before the small ones. So you need to build up the entire organization. So obviously your products will not be optimized only for SMBs. When I was in ads, right, we would not optimize our products for the small mom and pop shop, right? We would make sure to also figure out how they're using the products, but we will work with a large TV advertisers. We work with Coca-Cola and all like the big spenders, because for them it also needed to work. So yeah, this is the same as if I just like take a random example for when an engineering team was not performing. They were creating crappy codes and a legacy platform, and then eventually it broke. And then say that is basically how engineers work, and use this as an example why you should never have engineers in your team, right? And that makes no sense. So yeah, you need to build up the UX research discipline in a good way and integrate it in product development so it creates value for users, for the business, for product development.
I would say always think about like if it's a bit my fault that I didn't promote enough the value of research and design in the company. It just because it's easier to say, okay, the product manager doesn't understand, engineers do not understand, clients do not understand our role. So we are so important in the product, but nobody understands our role. So our job responsibility, I don't know, like do we need to write this in responsibilities, but it's building the culture in the company, that helping to support 100%. This culture that and show brings the evidence that our work really helps, that we do work well.
Oh yeah, it's part of a UXer's job to evangelize and to explain what UX does over and over again. And whenever I have research in my team, they work with a PM, the PM is fantastic. The PM moves on, a new PM comes, and then the PM doesn't know how to work with research. And so they come to me and say like, no, I have to start explaining it again, right? I'm like, stop complaining about that. That's part of your job, right? It's part of your to-do list. It will always be like that because you will have a PM that worked in a cellar on a back-end system, something never worked with any user-facing stuff, like doesn't know that, and it's your job to explain them how to work together, right? It's also a researcher's job, frankly, to figure out if research is having impact and what to change so it has impact. So in this case, with this engineering person you told me, right? If they had the problem that research was creating insights based on very small creators that were not important, right? That feedback needs to go to researchers, and researchers need to listen and say like, okay, we need to change how we do research because apparently we're targeting the wrong audience. And it's not helpful for a product development team if it create those insights. And if you don't do that, you have this disjointed teams where they're like not collaborating, where they're actually doing their own thing. And that's when bad products are being developed. But then that's leadership problem, right? You have there like this engineering lead and the UX leads of Twitch or whatever, like they should have worked together to figure out like which is the right way to set up research so it's actually delivering value.
I guess maybe the last question, how do you see the future of the profession?
I see the future of UX as bright. It is changing, but frankly, all the disciplines are changing, right? If you think about the job of an engineer, it's changing. AI is impacting how they develop products, right? If you think about the discipline of PM, of marketing, of sales, like everything is changing through these new developments in AI. And that obviously creates some angst in people because it's easy to basically do the things the way you have always done them. And when they change, it creates fear. Will I still be relevant? Will I still know how to do that? Will I be able to learn about that? But I have seen UX change along the last 30 years where I've been in UX. I've seen UX change many times, right? When I started to study, right, UX was all about desktop computers. And then later on, the internet came, and later on, mobile came, and then new options like AI. But before AI, like AR, VR, like different aspects of technology changed the way the UX profession works. And that was always exciting. So for me, that's an opportunity to learn new things. And if I think about research specifically, right, we have AI impacting research in how we do our work. So can we use tools to make research more effective, like faster and better, and to alleviate some of the burdensome tasks that researchers have and focus on cooler things?
I can add to that. There are like two things that make me optimistic. One, that there are now a lot of articles that say that maybe in the future team composition will be different, but you will definitely have developers, somebody who is responsible for signing that code is secure, efficient, and works as it intended. That there is a product manager who is responsible for the strategy of the feature or a product, and there should be a person responsible for working with design and users. Even if computers will be able to design interfaces, they still need input to understand what people actually need, what are their pains, and it's really hard, especially if it's a bigger product like you mentioned about Google. You can't afford running thousands of experiments that break everything because you will just lose a lot of users. You'll still need to have like intuition and input and somebody who will sign, okay, I approve this test or I don't approve this test. But we also see a lot of interesting opportunities. For example, tools for A/B testing. They are having so many AI features now that that can help us to run much more experiments, to test much more that we couldn't dream about years ago.
I mostly agree with you that the experiment piece, I think, is one that bugs me for many years, because at Google, they actually do run thousands of experiments. It's not 2, 3 a quarter. And the entire development has gone in a direction where you run thousands of experiments and then you might have a winner or multiple winners, but you never understand why, right? And so by doing that, you lose a lot of knowledge and opportunity to get better. And you have decisions, you have good, innovative ideas being killed by random experiments, which then stifles innovation. So I am not a big fan of killing things through experimentation. I think you should have, when you do an experiment, you should have an hypothesis about which one will perform better, and then you can confirm that. But randomly letting AI just change thousands of things and run experiments, and then you end up with like some weird thing that you think performs better on some weird metric, and then have that. I don't think that's good product development. I would caution about going in that direction, but we'll see. Google has learned that the hard way, right? Because in search in the beginning, there was a phase where the only thing people could change was the shade of blue of the link caller, because every change had to be bolstered by an experiment. If the experiment didn't show an improvement in some metrics, you couldn't launch it. And so Google was stuck in an innovation vacuum, because whatever bigger change to search it would do would lower those metrics. In the long term, it was a good decision, but you couldn't do it because in the short term, the metrics didn't show it. And search burst out of that when a new lead said, we're no longer doing that, right? We need to be able to innovate and to do changes if we believe it's the right thing to do, even if the metrics don't show that immediately.
Okay, thanks. That was awesome. Now maybe a few more minutes for rapid round questions and we can finalize. Yeah. Javier, how would you explain to your mom what are you doing for a living?
Well, I stopped explaining this to my mom a long time ago, but because she never understands it. But I would try to say that I help people develop better products.
What book influenced your product or business vision the most?
A book I like a lot is called The Art of Possibilities, which is a book from a psychologist and an orchestra director that explain how removing boundaries can free up your thinking and help you to see more possibilities than if you always stay within your frame. And that has helped me a lot in my career.
What product gave you the best experience ever?
For me, a true revelation was my first Mac, Apple Macintosh Plus. That's how old I am, because like being introduced like the first time to actual graphical user interface and all the possibilities that this like box of beauty had, like everything built in, you didn't have to build your computer and everything, that impacted everything.
What's the thing about your job that keeps you excited about it after so many years?
I love people. That's why I studied psychology. I love meeting people from different places, different backgrounds, working with them, helping them no matter in what situation they are, with their strengths and their weaknesses. That just drives me. That's where the magic is.
Talking about people, what would be the most interesting person you would like to have dinner with from like past or current influencers from whom you would want to learn or maybe just spend time together?
It might sound very cliche, but I would actually like to have a couple minutes with Steve Jobs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know I've heard that he's like a very controversial person and had a lot of good and bad things, but that would be inspiring.
What would you ask him, or what would you want to discuss?
I'm not prepared for that. I don't know what I would ask him. I think I would like to understand his approach to design and his gut feeling. We had a very gut feeling type of approach, right? He also he fired all researchers. Apple had no researchers at that time when he was there, and he said like good product managers, good designers know when something is good, and clearly he did. So he had that, right? But not all product people have that, and so learning more about that would be interesting.
And what's most valuable lessons you learned in your career?
I always say that to people in my team. There is a saying from a basketball coach, which is hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard, which means like it doesn't matter how talented you are. If you don't work hard, the one that works hard and is not as talented will beat you. And so and that is important, because like I work with a lot of talented people, but like they cannot put their horsepowers to the streets if they actually don't like just crank out work.
Thank you, Javier. That's awesome. I really enjoyed our conversation. We discussed so many things about bright future of user research and the challenges we have. Maybe you want to add something to the conversation?
Thanks a lot. This was a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, and we'll stay in touch.